I need your clothes, your boots, and your motorcycle.
Harley Davidson has recorded a profit of $1 billion this year. Is something you might have said in 2006. But you're not going to say that at the end of 2020 because Harley's profits in the first quarter of this year were less than $70 million, which was 55% of what they made in the same quarter in 2019. And before you counter with arguments about pandemics and quarantines, I have to remind you that the quarantine only hit the US and Canada halfway through March, the last 2 weeks of the quarter. What do you think the second quarter will look like? And 2019 was lower than 2018, and 2018 lower than 2017. A pattern emerges. So a couple of weeks ago, I put out a video on Harley Davidson's troubles in 2020, and the lid blew off my channel. This pretty new channel came alive with views and opinions about why Harley sales are declining. It seemed that I had tapped into a vast underground river of discontent and resentment aimed not at the motorcycles, but at the company which produces them, specifically at the management and the dealer network. Now opinions are like belly buttons. Everyone's got one. But if you have a YouTube channel, you can put yours out there. So here we will look at some of the reasons why Harley's profits are tanking, and have been long before this pandemic, and compare them to another company with an iconic name which has decided to follow a different path and has a much more positive trajectory. Yes, break out your tea and crumpets, we'll be talking about Triumph. First, a disclaimer. I love Harley Davidson. The bikes, not the management. And even though I put down a deposit on a new bike, and a rice burner at that, I'm still browsing Motorcycle Trader for bikes I like. Unfortunately, I'm not rich, so maybe next year, maybe 2 years from now. But the XR1200 is a perfect example of the kind of short-sighted decisions that the Harley higher-ups are known for. Innovate by introducing the best handling Harley ever, and then kill it before it has a chance to get off the ground. This is a pattern with Harley Davidson that has been repeated time and again. There is a spurt of activity that hints at innovation, and then the backpedaling to Harley's safe space of making 3 motorcycles and dressing them up in a myriad of different outfits to make you believe that they have 40 models. It's a sad state of affairs for an iconic company. Because Harley is iconic. In continuous production since 1903, this motorcycle company got its start as a performance brand, winning numerous races and championships across various disciplines. Yes, that's Harley Davidson I'm talking about. Harley's won road races, endurance events, dirt track races, set land speed records, and took home 16 Daytona 200 victories. If you remember that, then you also remember Jimi Hendrix performing the Star Spangled Banner at Woodstock. Because Harley's last win at Daytona was back in 1969, more than half a century ago. Throughout its early history, Harley lived and breathed the old adage, win on Sunday, sell on Monday. At one point, the Harley team was winning so much they were nicknamed the Wrecking Crew. It was not only the motorcycle of racers though, but of the farmers, the factory workers, and the soldiers who came back from World War II, bought their surplus bikes and went off raising hell, adventuring, or hiding from the past. The World Wars, the Korean War, the Cold War, the space race, the moon landing, time rolled on and so did Harley. And when the British and then the Japanese invasions came, the working class carried Harley Davidson on their backs through the thick boom years of the 50s and the thin years of the 1960s. Harley survived the AMF 70s due to a few innovations and the 80s due to blatant crony capitalism, and suddenly we're on top of the world again in the 90s. Stock prices soared as did sales, and what did the company do? They built multiple glass palaces by the side of every interstate in the country, kept production artificially low, and jacked up the prices on every motorcycle, motorcycle accessory, and piece of merchandise they had. They forgot their working class roots and began to cater to the wealthy and cash in on a bad boy image of the riders they had long since abandoned. Riders who could only afford beat-up used Harleys and who did their own wrenching rather than getting bent over a barrel by a dealership which charged a mortgage for a few pieces of metal and plastic and the labor to put them on your bike. And the bikes needed those pieces because the days of Harley being a performance brand were long gone. Without exhausts and air filters and hot cams, they were hopelessly outgunned by foreign competition. Slow, heavy, poorly handling, and poorly braking, Harleys became ornaments for the rich. Peacock feathers to show the world that you had made it, that you could drop the equivalent of your kid's college fund on a toy. It wasn't all bad though. There were attempts at innovation, and there were still riders who worked on their bikes and rode them to Sturgis instead of trailering them there behind their Lexus SUVs. But those riders were getting more rare, and the innovators were pushed out and ambitious projects killed in favor of sticking with the tried and true formula. Create a motorcycle and a line of apparel so the top 10% could cosplay at being Peter Fonda. Leather fringes and $90 t-shirts replaced the racing program, and glass palaces replaced the mom and pop shops. Dealers knew they had a product that was in demand, and knew they could set the rules and the prices. And while those prices were higher than Cheech and Chong, they offered rock bottom dollar for trade-ins, a very bad strategy for growing a brand and attracting new and returning riders. Soon Harley trade-ins began to appear in Honda, Ducati, and KTM showrooms where they garnered a good price, and every such bike told the story of another rider abandoning Harley Davidson for a brand that offered better performance or value or both. And so, after 2008, Harley's sales began to reflect this fact. The slide had begun, and it continues until today. Many of Harley's current riders are on their last motorcycle before they age out of riding, and their kids and grandkids are playing Call of Duty or doing ride shares or driving their side-by-sides on trails, or if we're really lucky, terrorizing the canyons on their MT-07s and SV650s, bikes that cost 2/3 the price of an Iron 883 and pack twice the performance. So what could Harley have done? Well, here's where we look at Triumph. I picked Triumph specifically because they are also a brand that plays up their heritage and inspires nostalgia. But that's not all they do, and that's why their sales are steady or steadily climbing while Harley's are crashing. To understand Triumph, one must recall that like Harley, they were an iconic performance-oriented brand with a rich history and a nation of people behind them. They were also upstaged by less expensive, more reliable, and higher performance motorcycles from Japan. Their arrogance and failure to innovate led to bankruptcy. They didn't have a rich uncle who could suppress competition and give them an unfair advantage. And they teetered on the edge, or went off of it, depending on how you define such things. But then the new owners changed strategy. They built a new high-performance engine that had nothing to do with heritage and everything to do with going fast. They diversified their lineup with an eye toward the future, and they attempted to appeal to young riders who would stay with the brand for many years to come. Now at this point, I feel the need to stress that I'm not sponsored by Triumph. I've never owned a Triumph, I haven't even ridden a Triumph in over 20 years. But the one I rode made an impression. It performed like a superbike and sounded like a Spitfire, even if it did look like the Fly. And if Triumph wants to sponsor a tiny YouTube channel like mine, fine. But they probably won't, since I feel an overwhelming urge to make fun of them for making a James Bond bike and charging £2,000 extra for a paint job and a 007 badge. Straying dangerously close to Harley territory there, Triumph. Anyways, when Triumph came back online in 1991 after being in a coma for 8 years, they did it with bikes that were there to compete with the best in various growing segments of the market. They made sport tours, helped pioneer the adventure bike, and absolutely stomped the competition in the naked bike world. Since the early 90s, both adventure bikes and naked bikes have grown in popularity exponentially, and Triumph have been there since the beginning. The result? Triumph is now an established company with decades of R&D in the markets that are growing, and have a loyal customer base consisting of riders of all ages. That's what thinking ahead gets you. And yes, they did bring back their Bonneville line and cash in on our growing fascination with nostalgia. But this line of bikes are modern even if they don't look it. They have liquid-cooled engines and performance competitive with Japanese and European retro bikes. Look at the Street Twin as compared to the Iron 883. Both bikes look good, both evoke feelings of nostalgia, both are close to 900 cc's, and both are going after a similar customer, a young rider on a budget. Except that the Street Twin is lighter, more powerful, faster, brakes better, handles better, comes with a passenger seat and pegs, and costs $1,200 less in Canadian funds. And if you want a passenger seat and pegs on the Sportster, that will be $314 extra, please. So if you're that budget-conscious young rider, which bike will you choose? And once this young rider upgrades, they are more likely to upgrade to a bike of the same brand than another. So that Street Twin owner may become a Tiger owner, or a Speed Triple owner, or a Rocket 3 owner. This is what Triumph is doing right. And if that customer does buy the 883, a Triumph dealer is more likely to welcome them and give them a better price on a trade-in than the other way around. That's how you get those new customers in the door, which Harley is not doing. There's a saying going around: Harley Davidson, yesterday's technology at tomorrow's prices. That's a brutal image for consumers to have about your brand. Now Harley was showing promise. A new engine and 2 displacements, an adventure bike, a naked bike, a muscle cruiser, and a cafe racer, and dirt tracker concepts, even an electric bike. Awesome. But then the pandemic hit, and now it looks like Harley is pushing back the introduction of all these innovations. Some may even be axed. It's like deja vu all over again. Run back to the strategy that's obviously not working. If Harley had only taken the Buell brand seriously, if Harley had only built an entire line of bikes, ADV bike, naked bike, etc. around the V-Rod engine, if they had used their massive profits to build better bikes rather than build bigger t-shirt stores. If. The truth is, Harley needs to double down on the Revolution Max engine and build some bikes that can outrun Indian, both on the road and on the track. They need to lower prices and offer much of the accessory equipment as standard. Every big twin should come with a Stage 1 kit. Every performance model should come with a Stage 2. And offering dual discs only on performance softails like the Fat Bob and the Lowrider S is insane. A Fat Boy weighs more than 700 pounds, almost 1,000 with Arnold aboard. Every motorcycle over 500 pounds should be sporting dual discs up front, period. Harley needs less cruisers and more of everything else. There needs to be a 1250 and a 975 Pan America, a couple of naked and cafe offerings, a muscle cruiser and a flat tracker, and they need to be competitive on price and performance. And keep the Sportsters, Softails and Baggers, but make sure that as they decline in popularity you have something to take their place other than t-shirts and hats. Harley Davidson needs to be a modern motorcycle manufacturer with a heritage line, rather than a manufacturer of heritage bikes and apparel with a few token newer models that are treated like unwanted stepchildren. All this talk, and yet when I pass by a customized Softail I still drool. I grew up with motorcycles that looked like motorcycles, and so the look and sound of a Harley will always appeal to me. But function and performance appeal to me more. So maybe a Harley as a second bike. Someday. The execs have work to do, and I hope they do it well, because I want that flat tracker, if it's fast and reasonably priced. I'd like to thank the viewers for your support and many of the comments that inspired this video, especially the curmudgeon, for providing me with an invaluable historical and cultural perspective.
If you're interested in any of the gear that Brooke and I wear or use, or the camera equipment we use to film this channel, the links are below. Everything listed there was bought with our own money and we are not sponsored by any company. However, the links below are affiliate links and the channel is paid a small amount for referring you to shop at no additional cost to you. We do not recommend any products that we are not satisfied with ourselves, but we do strongly urge you to do your research and select the correct size for items like helmets and clothing. As always, thanks for watching, your support is greatly appreciated. Please hit that subscribe button, give the video a thumbs up, and leave a comment below. And whatever you ride, enjoy it. Wave at other bikers no matter what they're riding, we're all part of a brotherhood and sisterhood. Keep the rubber side down, shiny side up, and may the spokes be with you.